Hi, you guys. I hope you're doing well. I hope you have a great day and you're navigating these times. I want to talk about the purpose of suffering for a bit. And I'm not talking about, or I try not to talk about those big times of grief when we know why we suffer. We know we lost a loved one, a job, maybe a certain situation, or where we know like the reason for our grief or the reason for our suffering because we um, are faced with sickness and disease or death even, right? The reason for the suffering in those situations is quite like natural and normal. Still, we can also grow and learn from those situations of great grief and great loss and letting go of things that were dear to our heart, and we know why we had to what we are letting go of, and we know the reason for our pain, right? Somebody we loved is gone, or we have to let go of something. But I would like to talk about those little moments of moodiness, grief, suffering, pain, and understanding the purpose of those situations. Because when we start asking questions in those times of like just grumpiness, moodiness, not being content or happy, which is like, don't get me wrong, which is not, it's not our purpose to constantly be cheerful and happy, right? Maybe it is, but like part of life is also to suffer. But those times of like suffering when we actually start asking questions, wondering what the heck is going on, because we are not sure of why we are feeling how we're feeling, that's a great challenge, and that's a great opportunity for us to really observe our own mood, our own mind, our unhappiness, and why we are feeling, what we are actually worrying about in that now moment. So the purpose of suffering is either that something isn't in our alignment, like isn't perfectly fine, which is barely the case, but it can be. And why not, you know? Why not creating those moments? Purpose of suffering is also, yeah, start questioning my discontent. Like, what is actually wrong, you know? Asking if um, if there's actually an actual reason for me being not satisfied in that now moment. Because the purpose of suffering can also be, a lot of the times, not always, that we don't have to suffer, that we have choice, free choice. And the moment we understand, like, oh, I'm actually in my mind quite often, I'm actually not in the now moment, I'm actually like fearing the future and are unhappy about my past, like in regret of my past, in regret of like what I did wrong or how somebody treated me, and this bitch over there was so unfair and so rude and so nasty, and that was abuse, and that was codependency, or that was such a toxic relationship. And or fearing the future, being in our minds about the future constantly. And I'm not saying there's nothing to worry, because I would never want to take anyone's um, feelings away of like fearing what they actually might like could be fearing, because it could actually happen. But if it's not here in that now moment right here, why would I keep like feeding that thought and feeding that fear? So one of the purposes is to, if we, and I think Eckhart Tolle speaks about that as part of his awakening when he was suffering a lot, and his pain became so big that he had his awakening in one night, I think. I'm not quite sure, but I think. And understood that his suffering was basically voluntarily, that he didn't have to suffer, that there was no reason for his pain. And it became so huge and overwhelming that he started to ask questions and observe the pain. And if it becomes really big and overwhelming, I think this is when we start to ask those big questions of either what needs to change in my life, why am I not satisfied, what is so painful, what is not in my for my highest good or in alignment with my soul. Or we can start to actually question if like what's the actual reason, and is there a reason, or is my mind just creating all these worst case scenarios about what might happen in the future and all those things that happen in the past but are not actually part of the now moment? And to grieve in the now moment, like having reasons to suffer in the now moment besides physical pain, besides like a broken leg, which is actually really painful, or like this person leaving me now, for example, there are not a lot of reasons to grieve. Especially if it's about like us fearing the future, because I can't do anything about the future besides like obviously like practicing whatever I want to practice, or like work on the things I want to work on in that now moment to prepare myself for a fruitful future. But like fearing those things that might come into my experience doesn't make a lot of sense. And that is the trick our mind is playing on us. And the bigger our grief, the more we start to ask questions. Is there actually a reason right now for me to suffer? What can I do if this situation or this person is constantly part of my suffering? And I'm not saying we should always put our suffering outside of us, but if there's one person or one situation that has been reason for us feeling pain for quite a long time, it's probably time to make changes, even though we fear what might come, right? That's also typical and like a very natural part of the human life, that there will be changes and that we are scared of those changes. Another reason for suffering is to grow and to build resistance and to grow inner strength and understanding of myself, my needs, what's not for me, what is for me, understanding what I have to leave behind and what I need to build and what I want to build, to feel a sense of fulfillment and contentment, or this relationship is not for me because it's constantly being painful, because my soul is giving me those signs that I'm, for example, in a toxic codependent relationship, and the purpose of that relationship is to come to my truth, to come to my self-esteem, to understand my worthiness, because it's not my purpose to suffer forever in that codependent relationship. It's for me to understand my worthiness and me taking care of myself by leaving this person behind or this job. And I'm not saying relationships can't be a challenge and work, but if I feel great grief in that relationship, chances are it's abusive or toxic or manipulative, and that person is not for my highest good. And the purpose of me being in that relationship and feeling great pain is for me to make changes, or for me to understand my worthiness and walk away, or for me to awake to maybe this is not the right place for me, or for me to understand there's no need to suffer because this person has no control over how I want to feel myself, right? But still, a loving relationship is a loving relationship with like support and care and kindness and compassion, and not about like putting someone down. I think that's quite clear and obvious. But like whatever you choose to do, you learn from it. If you stay in that relationship, okay, stay, and it's probably going to be, if you are in that toxic, narcissistic, or manipulative relationship, it's going to be painful, because chances are it won't change, especially if you're not finding self-worth and loving, caring feelings for yourself, knowing how to set boundaries or knowing how to walk away. And ask yourself sometimes what a friend would recommend, or what you would recommend a friend in those kinds of painful relationships. So the purpose of suffering is either to grow, to make changes, to understand what's not for us, what's not serving, what's not for my highest good, where I need to make changes, what's not in alignment with my soul, for my highest good. The purpose of pain and suffering is to understand that I don't need to suffer, because the reason for my suffering is my attachment to those things, my attachment to outcomes, my attachment to fear and worst case scenarios, my attachment to that now moment, to that one situation and that now moment, which will pass, because everything will. The reason for my suffering can be to awaken, to detach, to understand that nobody has control over how I want to feel myself, and nobody can actually control the self-love I have for myself. And whatever you want to learn out of suffering, either if it's to endure more pain, to understand one day that you don't have to do that, or if you want to stay in that relationship because you still need to understand that you're worthy of so much better, or if you want to stay somewhere to understand that you can stay wherever and you don't need to suffer. Kind of. But like, those could be reasons for why we need to suffer, to understand that we should make changes, can make changes, that we don't have to suffer, that we are attached to the things, to outcomes, that we are in our minds thinking about the future and the past, worrying constantly about what might happen. It can also mean to eventually make changes to how you treat yourself, how you're talking to yourself, your self-talk, what kind of food you're eating, even your like exercise routine, because it's all part of how you treat your vessel, how you treat your soul and your mind, and what needs changes because something is not in alignment. If it's our mind that is like making up all these stories, obviously our mind is what needs our attention, where we need to rewire our thought patterns, and where we maybe need affirmations, or like actually understanding like, oh my god, I've been playing small all these years, I've been talking negatively about myself. Pain is for awakening. Pain is to shake us awake, to understand I have a choice, mostly. The choice to make changes, the choice to change my patterns, the choice to, or at least get help for changing my patterns, the choice to think positively, how I want to think about things, the choice to like shift my focus from the miserable to where I actually feel grateful, by making that gratitude list in the morning, or shifting my focus. Because it's really, that's actually all it is. It's a shift of like my mindset, and choosing the thought that feels good, because we have no idea what's happening. We have no idea if those worst case scenarios of like the world is crumbling down actually is going to happen, or this person like talking behind our back. We have no control. We suffer because we are attached, and our egos are playing their parts as well, wanting to control situations and how people think about us, and all those things. I just really like, basically not in our control. That's just like the harsh truth, because we are like, I want to have control, and this person is thinking this and that of me, but like, we're just those little humans, beyond powerful, at the same time not more powerful than God or the universe or whatever. And releasing the need to control people's thoughts about us is like a huge lesson, also to find happiness, or at least contentment, or at least dropping those thoughts of like, what could happen, and what could I worry about today? And instead of like, because our mind's job is to think, and is to make up things, and is to like create those stories, because it needs something. But like, give it something different, give it something creative, give it some work to do, give it some creative work, give it some positive affirmation, give it some positive thoughts, give it some planning for a bright future, for like, how do I actually want to feel? What are my intentions for the future? What do I actually want to build? Oh my god, this person over there is my friend. Or like, and like, becoming aware of that is really important for our happiness. And like, part of us suffering all the time is also because there's something warm, comfy, and cozy in suffering. Because for many of us, it's quite familiar to see ourselves negatively, to see the worst case scenario. It has something warm and cozy and safe to suffer, to feel pain, and to also think about the worst things that could happen, because we've been there so many times, and it keeps us safe and in a place of, oh, all those things are going to happen and it's going to be miserable and it's going to be painful and crazy and awful, and why would I even try? It's the safest place to be negative, and it's the safest spot to suffer when there's actually no proof for our thoughts or physical reason for us to suffer, besides their own stories we keep telling ourselves way too often. And it takes practice, but we are capable of dropping those thoughts if we really want to. If we feel cozy in the suffering, we can stay there. But know that there is, it's possible to change that. And it's a practice, but it is possible to feel differently. So I hope that was of service for you, and I hope you have a good rest of the week or rest of the day. Thank you so much for watching.